deconversion guy. Converted man. The deconverted guy. That doesn't work as a song. Live. Hey, the deconverted man here. I said that already, but all right. Anyway, so I've been trying to set up this hangout chat with a person from Crossing Crown Radio, but I missed them and they missed me, and I don't know. We're trying to figure it out. And we, for whatever reason, decided to do like a Q&A, but I'm thinking that we really need to shift that up because I don't know. It just feels like we could get more out of it if we did the, questions live rather than giving them to each other in advance. Maybe I don't know. You guys, gals, robots, let me know like what we should do. Like we're not going to do a debate. We're doing, he wants to like do kind of a conversation. So, Q&A is okay, but I think it would be better if we did something else. Anyways, so Ash, I had a few questions for him. He has these 7 questions for me. They're really simple in my view. And I'm guessing he just wants to kind of get to know me or whatever. I don't know. So here's his questions. I'm going to answer them here. And then I'm going to try to work out with him like a different way we could go about our conversation whenever the bleep that finally happens. And again, if you have ideas or suggestions for that, let me know in the comments or in the chat if you happen to be here now, whatever. Number 1, do I have a religious background and what led me to become an atheist? Yes, I do. Christianity. Short story, a whole deconversion story. I've told this many times, but short version of that is I looked for the evidence and I didn't find any. So I deconverted. There just wasn't evidence to support it. Historically, logically, there just wasn't anything there. So that's it. Number 2, how do you know what you know? I don't really understand this question. It's very odd formatting. I'm guessing this is asking like in the past tense. So how did I know what I knew back then? I don't know. And again, this is referring to, I'm guessing, beliefs. And I think that I simply just believed the things that I believed. I read the Bible and prayed and worshipped and went to church, and that God and belief in God was just part of my life, and I just believed it. I don't think that until I was older, I didn't really start asking questions about it or thinking deeply, intellectually speaking about it. And I certainly didn't look for evidence for it because it's like, well, of course it's true. It's just like, there's no reason to think it wasn't, I suppose. But if it's asking me how I know what I know now, that is like, well, I know whatever I know based on my understanding of science and logic, to the extent that I understand those subjects. And there's certain things I'm pretty sure about, other things I'm not so sure about. And there's different levels of sureness and unsureness that I can't really quantify. I guess that would be the best I could really answer that, because I'm really not sure what it's asking. I don't think it sounds like something suppositional, like how do you know that you know that you know kind of thing. It's like, yeah, I don't know, but I'm not really sure what that is. So, number 3, how do you know your senses reliable in gaining knowledge? I think that's meant to say, how do you know your senses are reliable in gaining knowledge? You don't, not really. That's the honest answer to that. Is we know what we do know is our senses can fail us, and our senses can trick us. So we can be fooled by optical illusion. We can be fooled by sleight of hand and other so-called magic tricks. So what you see isn't always really true. We also know that you can lose your hearing, you can lose your sight, you can lose your memory can fail you. So do you do you trust that? Well, you don't really have a choice in the matter. If it turns out that your senses are not working as they should, or at least on an average level, then people outside of you hopefully will help you. So if they don't, then you might have it pretty rough. Uh, so this is that sort of hard sulfulism. I can never say that word, sulfulism, however it's said, where you get it to this point where, yeah, we know that our senses can fail us. So does that mean we can't trust them? Well, no, we can trust them to some extent. We have to. We don't have a choice. But at the end of the day, we also know that they could fail us. They could be tricking us. And do we know that they're failing us in the moment? Nope. That's going to have to be up to outside people to help you if something did fail. So if you're born blind and deaf, that's a very difficult situation. This whole book written about it is very interesting. And how you learn is totally different. How you experience the world, completely different than anyone else. And it's a shame that anybody would, be born that way, which is understandable under evolution, maybe, and science and the way things work. Whereas in theology, you might have to offer up different random explanations, like this person was innocent when they were born. Well, but they were under sin. They were born into sin. That's why bad things happen. Like it just sounds so hollow and empty as an explanation to why they would be that way. When they don't, they wouldn't have to be that way. They could have been born without those issues. Some people are born just with a brainstem. They don't last very long. And who knows how they experience the world, or even if they do experience the world at all. Like they can eat, they can breathe, they defecate, they do all the automatic things. And so it's like, well, eating's automatic. Well, to some degree it is. So they can do basic things, but they'll never talk. They'll never, know anything because they just don't have enough brain. And they, like I said, they don't last that long. So we recognize that our senses are limited. This is why we want external things to just us to confirm that something is true. And you might say, well, but there's a problem there because you build a machine and you're building it and you don't know if you can trust your senses. So how do you know that you actually built a machine? Well, hopefully other people will say, yes, you actually built a machine. What if those people are, illusions in your brain? Well, then you get into the whole we could all be brain and vats thing. You've got to assume that reality as you perceive it is real to move forward from that point in philosophy and in life. And it might turn out that the way you perceive reality is off and not quite in line with everybody else. And that's just, that's how it is. That's the reality of it. And this does seem like a presuppositional question. This is something that would be asked by a presupper. It's like, well, if you've admitted that you can't really trust your senses, then how do you know anything? Well, you know certain things to some degree, and if it turns out that your senses aren't working, you're not going to last that long. If it turns out that you don't really see the cliff in front of you, you're not going to live long enough to know that because you're going to walk off the cliff. So if you're still around and you're still alive, your senses are probably working good enough. And same thing for gaining knowledge. You have to, if your senses are working good enough for you to survive and be alive, then you will be able to gain knowledge from them. And then you can apply that to understanding other things. But this is why I want repeatable testing on any claim that's made, because then I can, eliminate the possibility that it's just a trick, that it's an optical illusion or auditory illusion or something of that nature. And without that test, I can't really be sure that the thing that I thought I saw was really what happened. So, people report UFOs. Well, of course, it's an unidentified flying object, but it's not a spaceship from, some other planet. That's we don't have proof that that has happened yet. And if it did, I think everybody would know worldwide. It'd be big news, So, just simply declare, well, I saw an alien. Well, maybe you saw somebody far away that was dressed like an alien. How do you know? Unless you can examine it up close, you wouldn't be able to make that determination. So, that's the truth of the matter. And if this goes down the presuppositional route or whatever, I just don't have time or energy for that. We have certain assumptions about how our senses work, and we have to live with that. The a priori belief that reality is real must happen for us to move forward. And I am fine with that assertion that reality is real and that my senses are good enough to figure to see reality. And to experience reality. I don't think adding a God helps you to solve that problem. So, number 4, where did matter and the laws of nature come from? This is a loaded question because it assumes that it came from something. It might have not come from anywhere. It might have always existed. It might have always been that way. I'm not saying that that's the case, but I'm objecting to the phrasing of the question. Matter, it seems, came from the initial large expansion of the early universe, that all the different molecules and atoms and whatnot formed in the hot, dense first few moments of the universe in the Big Bang, in the large expansion, where everything was super hot. You got quarks and stuff flying around, and that all, because of gravity, become stars, and then they explode and they make new elements, and then those things become more fancier stars that explode, spreading more elements and new elements around. And because of gravity, those things form into planets, others form into stars, and there you go. It's just, that's how that works. The laws of nature, well, the rules of reality, might have always been around even before we had a universe that we know of today. It might be that there's rules prior to that, or that always exist, or it might be that the rules came into existence the moment the universe came into existence. I have no idea. It's just, I don't know. For sure, I think that it might be that the laws of logic themselves are, in a sense, uh, the laws of nature, because I do think that logic maps to the universe that we understand. And it might actually map to reality apart from the universe, so that without a universe, or before the universe, if that even makes sense to say, uh, that certain rules had to be, that there were certain rules that, that paradox was impossible, might have been one of them, or the law of identity or something like that. But it's just, nobody was around to recognize those laws, but they were, those rules were still there, those laws were still there. It might be that way, or it might be, again, that they came into being the moment the universe came into being, and maybe different ones will come into being if a different universe comes into being. No idea. And I'm okay with not knowing. I'm okay with the mystery. I think we might figure that out. I think that a lot of that's answered by science, and not knowing is okay. Number 5, are you angry at religion or religious people? Some religions and some religious people, sure. I would think you would be angry too. I don't really care for Islam. Sharia law, mainly because of Sharia law. If that wasn't a thing, I don't think that, it would be as bad as it's come to be. And certainly in their past, they were doing a lot better than they are now. So, the radicalism really hurt them. And it hurt hurt them as a society, hurt them as a people. and that's because of religion. That's because of their religion. You can't challenge religion. That's one of the problems with it. It is asserted to be right because it comes from the God. And you can say, well, I don't have a religion, I have a relationship. I've heard that, but that too is an aspect of a religion to say that. So, yeah. And there's some religious people that are really nasty people. Just like there's some non-religions and non-religious people that are bad or bad people. So it depends on what it is. I think that the extreme ends are a problem no matter what you look at. So extreme religion is usually always bad, and extreme religious people are usually always bad. And I suppose extreme anti-religion or anti-religious people could always be bad, but it would depend. Extremes are usually bad, but not always. It just depends on what it is. Um, but I'm not like constantly angry at that. Just annoyed or irritated from time to time. I am annoyed or angry at when people say things that they think that the Bible says and use that to promote their own prejudice, and when the Bible doesn't actually say what they think it says. It's very annoying. It's very irritating. So sometimes would be the answer to that. Number 6, do you desire to have your sins forgiven? Well, I don't believe in sin, so no, I don't have any desire that there's nothing to forgive. There's no such thing as sin. Sin is an invention of the religion. It made a problem up and then makes up the cure to that problem. Sin is not real, so I don't need something that's not real. Forgive it. Number 7, do you believe in moral absolutes? Well, this is one of those moral questions, so I have to bring up, we need to talk about ethics. What ethical system am I looking at? Because different ethical systems have different ways of understanding morals. So, in some ethical systems, you could say that morals are absolute, and in others, you couldn't. But I don't think that you could say that all morals are absolute in any ethical system. You could say some of them are, for sure, but not all of them. And it just depends on what moral you're talking about and what ethical system you're talking about. Of course, for theism, you have DCT, divine command theory. So if God says it, that's what you do. That's what is right or wrong, is based on what God says is right or wrong. And that might change or it might stay the same. But if God says to do it, then you better do it because it's right to do in that moment. And maybe God will change its mind and it'll be wrong to do in the next moment. But you're stuck with the classical dilemma of, is it good because God says it's good, or is it good just because it's good? And there's no real way around that. But is there a moral that's absolute, that's always true under every situation in every circumstance? I don't know. I think you could probably get a majority of the world to agree to certain ideas. Like rape is bad. Like maybe you could get most of the world to agree that that's probably a good idea. But would that make it absolute? No, because it would just be an appeal to the majority. Even if everyone in the world agreed, it still wouldn't make it absolute. Just be something that we view as wrong and we all agree. I think that the morals that are good for society are going to thrive, and the ones that are bad will die out over time because morals evolve with the societies. So some of them might stay around that are bad or not very good, because it's not a perfect system, and we might weed those out as we uh, advance our civilization and our understanding of how things work. But an absolute is extraordinarily difficult to get to. Even if you say, well, it's a God that's saying it, but why is the God saying that, X, Y, and Z is right or wrong? There still is an underlying ethical system there what's the objective ethical system then? So why is it good or bad? Not just because it's said to be good or bad, but there has to be a reason it's good or bad. And what's that reason? What underpins that? So you still have to find that. And I think that you can set that at human well-being, for example, but that was a subjective pick. You picked that almost on a whim. You could have picked animal well-being, and you could have picked lobsters' well-being, but you probably won't because you're probably a human, so you're probably going to pick human well-being, and that will also intertwine with the planet's well-being and animals' well-being, because if those aren't taken care of, then humans won't be around very much longer. So the one thing will affect others, but what do you pick as your starting ethical value? And even if you have DCT, you still pick which religion and which God to follow to some degree. Maybe you don't really pick it, maybe it's picked for you. I don't know. It's complicated. But you still decide what God views as wrong in the Bible and what God doesn't view as wrong according to the Bible. And you still have to make choices depending on what you think God wants you. What would Jesus do? Remember those bumper stickers that were around everywhere back in the day? I do. But, it's like, well, it doesn't talk about microwaves in the Bible. So is it okay to microwave a cat? Well, the Bible's silent on that issue. Would Jesus microwave a cat? I don't know. It doesn't say anything about it. Doesn't mention. I don't think it mentions cats in the Bible. I could be wrong, but I can't think of a verse that mentions it. So it's silent on it. They're like, well, but it says to take care of animals. Like, yeah, well, but it doesn't say anything about microwave. So you have to make a decision on your own, unguided. So, even if you had a moral absolute, maybe you could have one or a couple, perhaps, but I don't think that you could have every moral be absolute, because situations will change, events will change, and what you do in response to that will therefore change. And who knows what you'll do in the moment. What you hope to do and what you will do, two different things. But no is the answer, but also kind of is the answer to this question, because I think that there's room for a possible one or more moral absolutes, but it would very much depend on the ethics, and it would also depend upon what it is, and also I do think it would, be really, at the end of the day, it would still be somewhat subjective. So I don't think you could say absolutely that it's a moral absolute, unless you could also say that the ethical system was an absolute. And in both cases, you'd have to do something that demonstrated that that was true. So without that argument, I have to be, I guess, skeptical that there are moral absolutes. So my answer is skeptical, I guess, about that. There you go. There, I've answered that question. Yes, no, maybe, and skeptical. So that was the hardest one of the easy questions. Steven says, "What's up?" in the chat. I'm answering questions the theist asked me. That's what's up. So, and if you missed it, then you'll have to go back and watch it later. He didn't ask any questions about rocks, so I got nothing for you there. So yeah, if any of you out there want to answer these questions in the comments, that'd be great. Because I'd like to have other people's view on how they would answer these sort of questions beyond my own view. That's all I've got, I guess, for now. And until next time, lobsters still exist. We can all agree on that, hopefully. And it's time to do the thing where I do the fin. Fin! I like how some people know that I'm going to do that and do it for me. Yeah, I'm ending the thing now.